I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the Australia Winemaker Special series. Across these 4 episodes, recorded in December 2022 and January 2023, we'll be exploring the Australian winemaking scene in the company of 4 different winemakers based in New South Wales, Yarra Valley, King Valley and Geelong. Wines from the first 3 guests in the series, Mayfield Vineyard, Rob Dolan Wines and Pizzini Wines, are all represented in the UK by Notria & Co. And wines from Mayfield Vineyard and Rob Dolan Wines can be tasted in London at the Australia Trade Tasting 2023. We close out the Australia Winemaker Special series in the company of Kelly Pearson of Ladygarden Wines. Kelly tells us her origin story and lessons learned from larger scale winemaking. We discuss natural wines, talk Ladygarden wine philosophy. She gives us production details and explores the current range. We talk changes in wine communication before Kelly explores possible future projects and export markets. Enjoy.
Well, my name's Kelly. Or Kelly Pearson. I've been in the wine industry over 26 years now. I started off in the wine sales and marketing field and ended up being a national brand manager. A retrenchment saw me go back to my old stomping ground in Brisbane. I'm originally from Geelong, but I'd been up there for many years in sales. And after about 18 months of, for want of a better term, dicking around, I really didn't know what I was doing in life and in any direction. And I found myself back at a bottle shop doing 2 things I was good at, talking and about wine. And I thought, well, I'm in my early 30s now. I really perhaps had a look at what I'm doing, and I thought I might try this winemaking malarkey. I've been always very interested. And so before I committed to doing some more study, some postgraduate study, I thought I better go and do vintage. So I called on all the contacts that I had and ended up with a vintage at Leasingham in the Clare Valley. So medium-sized winery in Australian terms. That's, I think, was about an 8,000-tonne winery. And in the cellar doing red winemaking, basically pump overs and so forth, pretty much the whole vintage. Did get to play around with a few other fun bits and pieces, and then from then I was hooked. From there I went and did continued vintage down at Stonehaven in Padthaway. I then went to California. I came back to Australia to, where did I go after that? Harvey River Bridge Estate in Western Australia. Did 6 months there as a sort of assistant, started off as vintage assistant winemaker. Went and did my postgraduate studies in winemaking. Already done a couple of undergrads. I didn't feel the need to do another 4 years, so I just decided to do postgrad studies there. From there, that took me to US again, to Long Island. I went and did vintage at Bedell Cellars over there. Came back and did vintage in central New South Wales, and then got my first full-time job in the Upper Hunter Valley at Yarraman Estate, which no longer exists. Nothing to do with me, but so from there I'd been trying to come back to Victoria, my home. My father hadn't been well for a long time, and I wanted to spend more time close to the family. And I'd applied for a few jobs and hadn't quite got that, and then one came up, and it got me back to Geelong, my home base, and unfortunately that didn't quite pan out as I hoped, and I ended up down the road at a big commercial winery, which wasn't at the time in my ideal, working at, the stuff that mostly went to the UK, the US, China export market, all, $6, $7, $8 bottles of wine, Australian.
Yeah.
But it was I had a lot of friends at the time look down their nose at that commercial winemaking sort of side of things. But I have to say it was an invaluable experience. It taught me a lot. So from there I went and did another production winemaking role at another local winery, and found I wasn't really making wine anymore, and I'd lost a bit of my mojo, my passion for what I was doing. And I saw an opportunity advertised to go to China, and I thought, well, why not? So I quit my job, got on a plane and went to Yunnan in the southwest of China, right on the edge of the Himalayas, and had the first of one of many really quite life-changing experiences working in that region, and working in that culture was just fascinating. From there, I got the opportunity to go to India, lived and worked in India in Karnataka, and worked for Charisma Estates. They're probably the well, one of the best. They've been awarded the best winery in India.
Yeah.
Very lucky to work with the owners, Uma and Krishna Chigrapati. And we produce some really smart wines from there, including some wines that have won Best Wine in India, but also won golds at the International Concours de Cabernet, which, was really amazing that, India is turning out these fantastic wines. And, came home and landed a job back home in Geelong, and I was at Mount Moriac Wines for 5 years. Oh, nearly 6, I think. So it was 5 vintages. And had started as something that was a bit of a side project. And then after that partnership didn't quite pan out, I've taken on the Ladygarden premise, which I'd always wanted to do something that really involved working with lots of other women, celebrating women in wine. We're definitely a minority out there in the workplace. And Ladygarden's grown from there. Last year was a bit of a consolidation year, the year before, 2021, 22, I got shanghaied into doing a vintage in South Australia that was supposed to be 10 weeks and ended up being nearly 9 months. So that sort of put things on the back burner a bit. But in the meantime, I started doing the plan of partnering with other female winemakers where I buy the grapes and pay for the winemaking, and their name goes on the label, and I help promote and promote their wines for them as well. So last year I partnered with 3 winemakers, and next year I'm hoping to partner with another 3 or 4. Oh, sorry, not next vintage. This time of year is always confusing. So that's sort of a slightly condensed version of how I had got into the wine side of things. Prior to the winemaking, I was a national brand manager. I was a sales rep for Negociants. I'd worked at many venues, and I'd worked at I'd worked at a few retail outlets as well. But I ran the Brisbane Polo Club cellar, which was a great door opener for me in regards to meeting, some really prominent industry players, which has allowed to, open a few doors over the time. So
yeah. It can't hurt. Yeah, no, it's absolutely fascinating, and I as you say, a slightly condensed version. There's loads that I can sort of pick up on there. But I guess I'm proud of all of the amazing guests that I've had to say that I have covered wines from India before on the podcast.
Oh, excellent. Yep.
And then also wines from China. So it may well be something that we refer back to and sort of bring in. So, but I do feel that it's great to touch on those geographies which have interested me, and I've had really good feedback from my listeners as well. But I'll go with my first instinct actually, which was actually to ask you about the as you were saying there, that the larger scale job that you had, which you said has provided sort of invaluable experience really on your wine journey, and ask you just it can be fairly short, but maybe just to delve back into that, because it's something that I think is maybe a little bit missing sometimes from people's wine journey. If I'm honest, because I think exactly as you said there, and it was so interesting. You said that people sort of look down their nose at you for doing that, but then actually in hindsight, you're like, this was actually a really key learning that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. So I wondered, again, just for the benefit of me, just to learn more, for you to sort of relive it. But I think also for I have a lot of listeners who are starting in wine, who are looking for vintage experience, just curious to unpick a little bit that particular experience from your story.
Yeah, sure. Look, for me, whilst it wasn't wines that I was personally proud to take to a dinner party, etc., it certainly fed the guys that I used to sail with very well. They loved that I was a winemaker. You can sail on our boat any day. But I think that people forget that these bigger companies has allowed the Australian wine industry to grow to what it is now, and have small producers who are doing all this. There were always people in that echelon of, super premium, small batch, organic, minimal intervention, but it was quite a thin layer, whereas now that's definitely growing. But I think the larger industries or organisations have allowed and opened doors for, especially in the export market, the Australian wine industry to grow and become what it is, and furthering what it is at the moment. So I think that's one part of it that people forget that. Another key element for me was learning a lot about. I did a lot of, and I sort of went out on my own, and the business ended up getting some consultants in doing lean manufacturing. So learning about maximising outputs, minimising costs, time, flow, workflow, all that sort of thing. Because, vintages, you're in the thick and fast of fruit coming in, etc. You've got rain events coming. You've got to make decisions about what's happening. And when you've had that experience in a large scale, to bring it down to a small scale is, relatively easy. And it gave me a lot. It gave me a lot of, financial and background and production sort of experience as well. But I think also the other key thing is, whilst, most winemakers are like, we like to do minimal and all the rest of it, and that's my philosophy too. It's nice to know that I've learned and have all those bag of tricks, because we do hit challenging seasons. It's just the nature of nature, that we have challenging seasons, and we need to know how to manage these. So, at the end of the day, we're running a business, and it's not everyone that can go, this vintage is screwed, we can just drop the grapes and we're not going to do anything about it. Like people got hit with bushfire and smoke taint. Fortunately, that's nothing I've never really had to deal with that. But learning all those tricks in the bag, so to speak, whilst you might never use them, you know them, and there's opportunities to understand what it means in the winemaking, context. I think a lot of people, they love the idea of all this lo-fi wine, but sometimes the people, I guess, who are making them don't actually understand the bigger picture and what it means when you come into. For me, I think there's a fine balance between making sure that your consumer, your customer, is getting the best possible product, but you're also doing the best possible thing for your wine, and also the best possible thing for those people that have grown your grapes. Because that's, to me, what winemaking's about, is showing that expression of what you're picking in the vineyard and taking through and putting into the bottle, and then ultimately in people's glasses. And that does change, year to year, season to season, for whatever reasons. So,
yeah, it's fascinating, and two things from my experience kind of come to mind, Kelly, hearing you say that. I mean, one is actually from the spirit world, from the kind of the hard liquor side of things, and they have an expression which is vodka pays the bills, which is like, okay, the least interesting, the plainest, the most neutral, the most boring part of the whole spirit industry. That's actually the one that makes the money. That's where it gets sold. If you've got that in your portfolio, then you've at least got some business stability, which again is not sexy to talk about, and doesn't get the light when people are talking about amazing things like the rums and the whiskies and these sort of single casks and all of these sort of amazing things that are coming out. But it's like vodka pays the bills. There's that side of things, and then I think to the complete other side, there is that. I'm friends with people who are, kind of, almost like natural wine fundamentals, like where they're or fundamentalists.
Yes.
To the point, where they literally they put on the bottle, they say this has been just put in the picked. There's nothing else in here. There never will be anything else in here, and that that's a very extreme approach to take, and there are lots of people that go along with that, but it doesn't always give the wines that people want to buy, and that particular producer, I've seen images of them. They were going to flush all of their wines down the drain because it didn't go through as sort of planned. So I'd like to think that what you've spoken about there is maybe a happy medium in between those. It's because ultimately for the sustainability of the people involved, then you need to be making wines that people are going to like, and you may need to intervene at some point to make sure that actually happens.
It's a niche market, that extreme, natural wine movement and everything. And I have seen some really interesting, and I will never say outstanding, really interesting and different, but there's an awful lot out there that are just, to me, just horribly faulty. And I that's just my take on it. Look, there's a market, and someone's done really well in selling that in. But I think there is a fine line, because we're here to make a living, and it's what's the saying in the wine industry? How do you make a little bit of money in the wine industry? Start with a lot. There's all sorts of business models these days, so it has evolved and changed and so forth. But just to take up on what you're talking about with the vodka example, is that I've got a girlfriend who makes an amazing portfolio of wines, and she's on a property that's she's a fifth generation farmer on that property. She started the vineyard and the winery, etc. She's doing some really cool, interesting varieties. She's doing Lagrange. There's some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
But the wine that drives her business and allows her her cash cow is a Sauvignon Blanc. And it's a cracking little wine, and she sells bucket loads of it. And that allows her to be able to do this other thing, but at the different echelon of her portfolio. I had the opportunity to work alongside her. She was down the road for a while. I was in South Australia, and play with some of these varieties that I'd Menthia, Lagrange, which I never had the opportunity to make, and rarely drank anyway. But she's made a Montepulciano for me this year, which I'm pretty excited. I haven't seen it for a little while yet, still over in South Australia. So we're going to look at bottling that probably just after vintage this year.
I love it. Yeah, this is super interesting, and I think that for me then it puts your project in a totally different perspective then, because knowing where you come from, knowing your experience, and I guess the sort of feels like a very safe pair of hands to be going forward on that, and with a realistic view to actually being able to grow a brand, to supply markets, to keep customers happy, and to make wine consistently when nature throws whatever it will at you. I know you're potentially coming out of a La Nina cycle at the moment in Australia, and it's like those things are going to come around again, and it's not okay for any brand, I think, and especially a smaller brand, to kind of have to put those things on hold because of a weather event which is predictable. It's coming. So it's like, okay, what you're gonna just not make wine in those years? It's got to be adapted to and move forward with. So I think given all of that, I think it'd be great to maybe I guess switch back into talking about your journey, which in terms of Ladygarden Wines, which is you said started as a bit of a side hustle, and maybe had its sort of momentum, various momentum and inertia to getting going. But it sounds as though now you're in a place where you're moving definitely in the right direction, and you've got something to sort of really meaty to kind of talk us through and to kind of take us into. So what is the current, the 2023 iteration of Ladygarden Wines? What does that currently look
so
like?
So it's really just, it's come together really well. I spent quite a bit of time the year before I got seconded to South Australia for vintage, sort of built the building blocks of how I was going to do this, where it would go, the story and what it meant, how I could partner with women. Do I finance it and make it 100% mine? Do I do this? So where I'm at now is I've got some wines from 2021 that I made, some wines from 2022 that I've made, and then I've got my 3 partners in wine from vintage 2022. And so that's Erin Pooley from Little Francis Wines, Anita Good from Wangalina, and Kelly Russell from Bellarine Estate. She's an assistant winemaker who looked after my Geelong fruit for me this year and did a terrific job. Mm-hmm. This next coming vintage, vintage 2023, I've got 3 or 4 winemakers. I'm still sort of romancing the last one to see if they'll come on board. And we'll create some of the wines under Ladygarden, but I'm expanding that into an opportunity. So at the moment, I'm owning 100% of what Ladygarden is, and I'd like to. Then that's a big financial commitment for a sole operator, etc. So what I'm also doing is offering the opportunity to do some collaboration, so a bit of a joint venture brands, and we can create a label that I'm putting this portfolio together and then subsequently distributing. I'm doing all the distribution myself. I've got 500 dozen. I've already sold nearly 100 dozen, which is super exciting. Mm-hmm. The brand has been really well received. The whole story has been really well received, and the wines have been well received. So that's where I'm at the moment. Ultimately, my goal would be purely selfishly that I'd like to partner with female winemakers from around the world so I can travel more and drink more, international wines and eat food from all these amazing, wine country areas. So, I guess that's a bit of the selfish side of the business, is I want to build something for the next 15 years that I'm happy to travel and work with amazing people and eat and drink wine all around the world. But I also want to give back, and I've at my heart is a fairly generous person, and I'd like to start giving back, I think, to the industry, so to new entrants in the industry, where we can set up a scholarship, we can offer internship opportunities and network people together to put them in position so they can be mentored by other female winemakers, to grow that network, not only for the Ladygarden brand, but that collaboration, and then potentially any other female winemakers that want to put their wines in that portfolio that we can distribute. Mm-hmm. But I'd also like to start putting aside some money and donating to some charities that are, and one close to my heart is that the fastest growing demographic in Australia, and I'm guessing it would probably be somewhat, in other countries as well, as of homelessness, is women from 45 plus, because they've come out of marriages, and they've not had the opportunities for careers and jobs, etc. So I'd like to start giving back to those sorts of organisations as well. So it's a business that allows me to do what I've trained and have experience in. I'm passionate about business and marketing. I love that side of things. I love the winemaking, and I also want to give back. So it's a sort of a combination of everything that hopefully allows me to give a bit back while, doing the things that I love.
I love it, yeah.
And sharing stories about wine. My why is bringing people together and sharing their story, and my medium for doing that is wine.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's fascinating. I think it is as well. It just reminds me, the power of this medium, really, because we can get into that story. We can hear it. It's obviously these things that are close to your heart, and these things that, again, sustainability. I know this as a business owner myself. To get up every day and do something, it's got to give something back to you as well. It's got to give you that energy, and obviously there's a fire that's lit there. inside you, Kenny. So it's great to.
Yeah, and it's been smouldering for a while, and I've managed to flame it all up. And I think time away that I spent last year, although it was a lot longer than I expected, has really cemented, after a few years of, we've had COVID, I had the business partnership breakdown, and just a lot of changes in life and everything. And I am just so excited about it. I mean, next week I'm off to do some work in the trade in the Gold Coast, in Brisbane and in Sydney. I'm doing a trade launch in Sydney, which I'm really excited about. I'm partnering with 2 other female distributors. One does a small batches of Italian wine, one does Lebanese wine. So that's going to be really exciting. I've got a consulting client that I have in Queensland. I'm going to do some bottling while I'm up there. So, I'm doing lots of little things that's really ignited that fire, and I'm super excited to start sharing that story because it's ready to be shared. The wines are looking great. I think it's the right time to be doing it. And I've got a lot of support from across the board, not just, women going, yeah, that's really awesome. A lot of dudes are saying that's really great, and really funny little market segments where I think, really? You think that's cool? I'm like, that's awesome that you think that's cool, but I would not have picked that from you.
It's particular ones that kind of.
All the white males. That doesn't go in, please.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I don't mind. You'll edit it to make it sound not so bad. No, it's just interesting, especially like some of the young hipster dudes. They do their own thing. They've got these funky labels, and I'm not. I'm not old, but I'm not young, and I'm certainly not a hipster. And they're like, that's awesome. We should do a collaboration because I want to put my money where my mouth is and support the women. Yay. So it's just had really great feedback. And I think I'm doing something. I'm out in the trade, and I've got a USP. No one's doing this specific thing.
Yeah.
And it's tough out there. And so I've got an interesting story. I've got the energy and excitement behind it. And I've got some great women, along for the ride. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And I think, what would maybe help me to now, visualize, I guess, the brick and mortar, if you like, and, where the next part of this. So again, it's one of the great things I think about wine, and, is that this can be bottled, this can be enjoyed. But what's the interim step then? So, where are you making these wines then? What does that side of the look like?
Well, I was away last year, so I did make a Chardonnay over at the winery that I was working at in South Australia. So I got some beautiful Limestone Coast Chardonnay, got some new barrels and some old barrels, and I've been playing around with that. In the meantime, what I had previously been doing is when I'd left my permanent employment, I'd gone to another winery down there, and I had some equipment that he could use. So he just built a shed, and it was a really good mutual arrangement at Belbray Estate. But with the other wineries, so I partnered with Erin she's based in Beechworth, so she made that up at Beechworth, and Anita made hers at her winery. So I'm trying to, minimise that carbon footprint of moving fruit. It gets hopefully processed reasonably closely. It's Australia. Sometimes that's not possible. So at each of those wineries, I suspect this year there's about 3 or 4 balls in the air, so I don't know exactly where I'm going to be, or whether I'll be doing a full vintage somewhere, whether I'll be doing some Geelong fruit. There's a few things sort of happening there that haven't quite sort of all come together yet. So, like the pre-vintage circus of juggling what's going to happen with what fruit you can get, where it's going to happen, etc. So nowhere set for me yet, but these other winemakers that I've got are working at their wineries or wineries that they're associated with.
Amazing, yeah.
I don't have a home. My home, My home is Geelong. I was born and bred here and I'm based here. I mean, I don't know if you know much about the Geelong wine region. There's 3 fantastic sub-regions here that are really quite different. So the Surf Coast where I used to work, the Bellarine Peninsula, and the Burrable Valley. So wines like By Far and Bannockburn are out that way, Lethbridge wines that you might have heard of, yeah. So really distinct different regions, and I've had fruit from all 3 of those regions before to play with. And so one of the oldest wine regions in Australia. Just sort of got lost off that story got lost off the history of Australian wine a little bit, I think, because there was a big hole from when they started, when the Swiss were out here first and so forth. So that's my sort of spiritual home, I guess, but my business now will take me to a lot of places, I suspect.
Yeah, and I think, maybe more than just about any guest I've ever had, then, where the home is really the idea, isn't it? It's the concept, it's the people that you working with, and it's in a sense it's that impact that you want to make out in the world. It's like, okay, actually, this is 2023. You don't need to be let's pick the grapes, let's stick them on trucks, let's all bring them to a big shiny facility somewhere, and let's make it all together, and I'll be there overseeing it. It's again, there's technology, there's other things to take account of, and it needn't have that kind of industrial age approach. These things can be happening simultaneously. You can be tuning into what's going on in different parts, and maybe I've had conversations about this with winemakers during COVID. Where people have needed to be in a central location and manage things via the phone. It's maybe actually a very good practice for exactly that kind of that kind of approach to distributed winemaking.
Yeah.
But you've got the idea and the concept to kind of bring it all together. So in a sense, that is the home, isn't it? That is your home, is the idea. And the concept.
Well, I think my home's, I guess, the people. Yeah, because that's I do get a lot of energy off working with others and so forth. And whilst this is my own business, and I come from a business background and I did a commerce degree, I'm on a steep learning curve on all the new whiz bang computer systems that you can use to run all this stuff. So I'm sort of doing everything myself, and I'm looking forward to getting a little bit further down the track where I can get some additional help with that side of things. But, what this is giving me is allowing me to build the business from the ground up and to have that structure and build that cult, like even it's only me, but my relationship with all my growers and my winemakers, et cetera, to build that culture from the ground. So when other people come on board, it's very entrenched in the business of what we are, and it's about caring for each other. Yeah. It's about telling that story. It's about producing interesting and different and tasty wines that people want to drink and enjoy.
Amazing. And I've got here in front of me just that information, and that was exactly what I was looking at there. So we're obviously on the same page. Could you almost give us that kind of blow by blow around what bottles are out there? Because it sounds like a really cool, really diverse mix of wines that are out there. So can you
cool.
take us to what's in the bottle?
Yeah, so my current range, I've got a sort of a pet nat. I've called it the fizz. It's a pet nat style, but it's actually made with the 3 main champagne grape varieties. So Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and a little bit of Pinot Meunier. I had done that wine before, or previously with the Pinot Meunier, but it was so good on its own that I put that into a rosé because that actually looks terrific, because the sparkling's great, but I thought that was a point of difference for rosés as well. So it's got, that's really delicious. It's got these lovely strawberries and sort of cream character going on the nose, but really Provence-style bone dry, palate on the rosé. I've got a field blend white, so I get access to some Marsanne in Geelong, and I threw in a bit of Chardonnay and a little bit of splash of Sauvignon Blanc to make something a bit different and give a bit more volume, and that turned out really well. 2022, there's a Marsanne. That's from Geelong Fruit. One of my growers that I've been working with, Jeff Anson from Bowen Ridge, has been fantastic. He's always been great. I had a Pinot from him from 2021, and unfortunately there wasn't much of it, and I've actually sold out of that already, which is like fantastic. So that's really great feedback. And I've also got a Yarra Valley Cabernet, it's a 2022 vintage, so made in April or processed and fermented in April into barrel, a late April, May, and out of barrel and pretty much straight into bottle, minimal anything done to that. It didn't have any new oak, and that's absolutely delicious. It's this beautiful, vibrant, lifted aromatics Cabernet, but still got this really lovely texture, crunchy texture underneath. So an early release and quite different from, the staged Cabernets. I've got also in bottle, I mentioned, not in tank still or in barrel still, the Montepulciano over in South Australia and the Chardonnay, so they're yet to be bottled. Yeah, so that's the 7, 8, 9 wines, but, have I missed any? Oh, yes, sorry. Erin Pooley from Little Francis in Beechworth got hold of some Arnaise from the Alpine Valleys, and she made an absolutely delightful wine. It's just delicious. So I've got an Arnaise from the Alpine Valleys in the 2022 range as well. And just to go forward for a little second, I've got some really interesting stuff happening this year. I've got some Sangiovese from up in the valleys again, up in near Bright, and some Chenin Blanc from Western Australia. And then one of my I'm going to do a couple of collaboration joint ventures with those winemakers as well. And we're going to do a really interesting Grenache from Western Australia, and we might do another a true pet nat with something we're not sure yet, and maybe even a bit of Prosecco. We'll see. Still, as I said, lots of balls in the air.
And this is it. And, I think it's, again, this is great learning for me as well. I think it will be great learning for the listeners as well. This is the practical side of winemaking. I think it's, and again, I think it's the side that not enough people talk about, because it just gives you the insight into, okay, yeah, we turn up at the shows and we've got the bottles lined up, and it's all looking beautiful, and it's like that thing of, oh, it's 10% this grape and 5% that grape, and it all seems so perfectly planned out, but I think again, it's working with an agricultural product, so there's always going to be an element of uncertainty. It's working with people as well. There's always going to be, and logistics. There's always going to be elements of uncertainty. So, it's great to kind of, you'll have this to listen back to in the future and hear back, and how you were looking ahead to vintage 2023, and then you'll be able to see how it actually turned out when you.
It's interesting you say that with people, like they go to the show or they have these wines and it's all this romantic idea of a beautiful meal and wine and sharing it with your friends and all the rest of it. I remember being in a role in Long Island in New York, and it was a long vintage. It was challenging for a number of reasons, and the Australian me was there. Probably covered in red wine because I just can't, or grapes or something, because I'm a bit like what's that character from Charlie Brown who always manages to still attract the dirt and everything. And I'm tired and I'm filling a barrel, and they're doing a lovely walkthrough of the winery, and the general manager's going, "Oh, this is Kelly. She's from Australia." And I looked at these people and they're looking at me like, who is this woman? And I said, next time you're sitting down, remember the hard work. Remember this. This is what winemaking is about. Yeah. It's getting your hands dirty. It's being, and all the rest of it. It's not just the end glamorous side of the sales and the events and the big restaurants and the dinners. It's people forget that. And to take it a step further, it's the vineyard. It's all that amazing hard work that everyone does in the vineyard.
And the really interesting thing for me, I think, is, I totally agree with all of that, and I think it's been, that's been one of the best things ever, is actually going and traveling to, it tends to be some of the smaller wineries where you'll kind of see all of that, where you'll see the hard work, and you'll see what kind of goes on, and it's not this sort of perfectly manicured, presented thing. Without the kind of, sterilizes all of that and kind of takes that away. But I actually think that, that is really the thing that will help bring new people into wine as well. I think that actually, the people that, they're like, okay, that maybe have thought wine is boring, and, that they don't get the stories of people. They don't get to see people who are, really, really doing that hard work. And that just, what's more relatable, where you've got all the ideas and you're, the ultimate source of knowledge, or, where you're just human, where you've actually got some uncertainty, where you've got some fragility, but out of that and out of sharing that, you then have, where it all kind of comes together in the bottle, something that you can share and you can just enjoy. And I think that actually, it's that whole thing of kind of, looking in the kitchen, looking behind the curtain and actually seeing, who is behind the wine, and, what are their stories? I think.
Yeah, it's interesting that, across all, talking about, I mean, I've done, I've been to a few conferences and so forth lately, and across the board, just not even outside of the wine industry, is that the market is looking for integrity and honesty. And I think we're going into a phase in business, in life, in the world of I'm hoping we are, from that less manicured perception that people put out there of themselves through the growth, especially of things like Instagram, etc., to showing that, like you're saying, that reality behind it is that that work that's done in the vineyard is bloody hard work, and the winery at vintage time is hectic. You've got 6, 8, 10 weeks to get those grapes off in that period of time at their optimum ripeness to make the wines and do what you have to do to it. And that tail end of the process is equally important. But I think bringing that reality and that integrity and that honesty into that whole process is something that, as an industry, I think is really important. And I think the public are starting to really want that across the board, and they want to know the origin of everything, and they want to know that it's local. They want to know the people behind it. They want people behind their thing. There's a shift, I guess, especially I guess more in the premium wine market rather than mass produced, that people are coming back and wanting that accountability of what they're actually consuming themselves, and so they need to understand where it all comes from. So yeah, I'd agree definitely with what you're saying there. Yeah, I'm hoping within a couple of years that I'm financial enough to be able to do some Ladygarden and some collaborations overseas. I would love to get to do a northern vintage in either Italy or France. I've got places lined up where I can go and create some Ladygarden. I've got some wonderful young French winemakers in Champagne, but I just can't justify financially at this point putting, $30,000 aside for for something that's not going to get a return for 4 years, as much as I love Champagne. But I'm hoping that's the sort of thing I can do down the track. I've got great connections in the US, no one in Scandinavia though, and a few in the UK, but, definitely friends in China and India and Israel and, all through Europe, Spain, Portugal, etc. So that's ultimately what I would love to be doing. How quickly that happens, I guess depends on how I manage to do, but I would love to be popping over every year to the Northern Hemisphere and working with people, or we're working with women and importers and so forth in those countries and those regions. So absolutely, that would be my dream. And alongside what I was saying is working over there and producing wines in those countries, I'd love to be able to export into, the UK especially. I've spent a lot of time there. I quite a bit of my childhood there, and, my obligatory gap year. So I love the UK and what that offers for the Australian wine industry, I guess, and also potentially my brand. I'm small fry at the moment, really only making 2 or 3 pallets of each variety, but within a few years, I'm hoping that, I'll be able to produce more and that we can, get that to both the UK and the US and potentially even into some select places in Europe. It all just depends on the trajectory of, the growth, I guess, and how I can finance that where I go, and that next step of growth will be interesting. I've got a few, things in the pipeline and plans in place, but I definitely want to be exporting. Obviously the opportunity to share the story about what I'm doing on here is that one of those first steps. So we're getting that story of, what have I created? The hashtag share the Ladygarden love of getting that story out there. And so then there's always talk and so forth, and I can get hopefully a bit of momentum with that, and then back that up with the opportunity to get some of those wines into the marketplace.
A huge thanks to Kelly Pearson of Ladygarden Wines. Please do help to amplify this episode and the series by sharing the direct link, which is interpretingwine.com/487. You can, as ever, find links to all episodes from the series in the description below if you'd like to catch up. That brings the Australia Winemaker Special series to a close for now. All that's left is to say a huge thank you to all of the guests from the series. And if you've enjoyed the series, do make sure you're subscribed to Interpreting Wine Podcast to be alerted when the next series goes live. And of course, I'd love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.